My career, reputation, and entire life were about to crumble because of $75,000 missing from the company safe. Money I never touched. As I sat across from stern-faced executives and security personnel, their accusatory glares burning into me, I knew I was being set up. But by whom? And why? The security footage would eventually reveal a truth more shocking than the theft itself, exposing a web of betrayal that had been forming around me for months. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Friday started like any other day at Meridian Financial Services, where I'd worked as an operations manager for the past 6 years. The office hummed with the usual end-of-week energy, people finalizing reports, scheduling client meetings for Monday, and making weekend plans. I'd arrived early to prepare for our quarterly department review, organizing my presentation notes at my desk while enjoying my morning coffee. My name is Mitchell Carson, and at 34, I'd built a solid career at Meridian. I'd climbed from junior analyst to operations manager through dedication and consistent performance. My team respected me, and I prided myself on running a tight ship while maintaining a friendly work environment. My department consistently hit our targets, and the higher-ups had recently hinted at a possible promotion to regional director. Around 9:30 a.m., my office phone rang. It was Vanessa Harper, our HR director, asking me to come to the conference room on the executive floor immediately. Her tone was clipped and formal, unusual for Vanessa, who typically radiated warmth. A flicker of unease passed through me, but I brushed it off. Maybe they wanted to discuss the promotion earlier than expected. The moment I stepped into the conference room, that hopeful thought evaporated. Seated around the glossy table were CEO Richard Blackwell, CFO Patricia Donovan, Head of Security Thomas Reed, and Vanessa. None of them smiled. None of them offered a greeting. The air felt charged with tension. "Take a seat, Mitchell," Richard said, gesturing to the lone chair facing the group. As I settled in, I noticed a manila folder centered in front of Patricia. My mouth went dry. Richard cleared his throat. "Mitchell, are you aware that $75,000 is missing from the main office safe?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Missing? No, I had no idea." The funds were counted Wednesday afternoon and were discovered missing during this morning's audit, Thomas explained, his eyes never leaving my face. "The safe shows no signs of forced entry." Patricia opened the folder and slid several papers toward me. "Only 6 people have access codes to that safe. You're one of them." My hands trembled slightly as I looked at the documents. Printouts of safe access logs showing that my code had been used to open the safe at 7:15 p.m. on Wednesday, long after I'd left the building. "There must be some mistake," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I left at 5:30 on Wednesday. I went straight home. Can anyone verify that?" Thomas asked. The truth was, no one could. I have lived alone since my divorce from Elaine 2 years ago. Wednesday evening, I'd ordered takeout, watched a basketball game, and fallen asleep on the couch. No witnesses, no alibi. The system doesn't lie, Mitchell, Patricia said, her voice cold. "Your code was used." "Someone must have stolen my code," I insisted, feeling sweat beading on my forehead. "I didn't take that money." Richard sighed heavily. "We've always trusted you, Mitchell, but the evidence is concerning. We've contacted the police, who will be here shortly. In the meantime, we need to suspend you pending investigation." "You're suspending me? Based on what? A log entry that could be explained a dozen different ways?" "We're following protocol," Vanessa interjected, her professional mask firmly in place. "You'll be on paid leave until this is resolved." Thomas stood up. "I'll need your company ID, building access card, and for you to clear your desk of personal items. I'll escort you." The humiliation of being marched to my office under Thomas's watchful eye was excruciating. Colleagues stared as I packed my family photos and a few personal items into a cardboard box. Whispers followed us down the corridor. By Monday, everyone would know. As we reached the lobby, 2 police officers were waiting. Detective Marcus Coleman, a stern-faced man with salt and pepper hair, introduced himself and his partner, Officer Rivera. "Mr. Carson, we'd like you to come down to the station to answer some questions." "Am I under arrest?" I asked, my voice embarrassingly weak. "Not at this time. We're just gathering information." The drive to the police station was a blur. My mind raced through possibilities. Who would have stolen my access code? Who would want to frame me? I'd always maintained good relationships with my colleagues. At least I thought I had. At the station, Detective Coleman led me to an interview room. Not quite an interrogation room, but close enough to make my skin crawl. The questions were thorough and repetitive, designed to catch inconsistencies. "How long have you worked at Meridian?" "Who else has access to the safe?" "Have you experienced any financial difficulties recently?" "Would anyone want to set you up?" To this last question, I had no answer. I couldn't imagine who would want to destroy my career this way. After 2 hours, they let me go with a warning not to leave town. As I stepped outside, the reality of my situation hit me full force. I was a suspect in a significant theft. Even if cleared, my reputation might never recover. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the familiar streets of my neighborhood. My phone had been buzzing continuously, colleagues, probably, hungry for gossip. I ignored it. Inside my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, my mind still spinning. The suspension, the police questioning, the looks on my co-workers' faces, it was overwhelming. But beneath the shock and fear, anger began to simmer. Someone had deliberately set me up, and I needed to find out who. I finally checked my phone. 23 missed calls and numerous text messages. Most were from colleagues, but 5 calls were from Allison Taylor, my assistant manager and closest ally at Meridian. I returned her call immediately. "Mitch, what the hell is happening?" Her voice was a mixture of concern and confusion. "There are rumors flying everywhere. They're saying you stole money?" "I'm being framed, Allison. Someone used my access code to open the safe." "That's insane. Who would do that?" "I don't know." I rubbed my temples, fighting a growing headache. "Who else has access to the safe?" "Richard, Patricia, Thomas, Vanessa, and James from accounting," she listed. "And you, of course." James Wilson. Something clicked in my memory. "Allison, didn't James request a transfer to the Denver office recently?" "Yeah, about 3 weeks ago. It was approved. He's leaving next month." A transfer to another city with a promotion would require significant funds for relocation, new housing, possibly private school for his kids. But surely James wouldn't risk his career for a theft this blatant? "Allison, I need your help. Can you check if there have been any unusual behaviors from any of the other access holders? Anything out of the ordinary?" "I can try. But what am I looking for?" "I'm not sure yet. Just keep your ears open. And could you check if anyone accessed my computer while I was in meetings this week?" "I'll see what I can find out." "Mitch, this is serious. The police were here asking questions." "I know. Just be careful. I don't want you getting dragged into this." After hanging up, I poured myself a strong drink and tried to think logically. The money was taken Wednesday evening using my access code. I needed to prove I wasn't at the office at that time. My phone. I opened my location history, praying I hadn't disabled the feature. Relief washed over me as I found what I was looking for. A clear timeline showing I'd left Meridian at 5:27 p.m. on Wednesday and arrived home at 5:53 p.m. I hadn't left again until Thursday morning. It wasn't concrete proof. A clever attorney could argue I'd left my phone at home and returned to the office, but it was something. I forwarded the data to Detective Coleman with a brief explanation. The weekend crawled by. I alternated between anxious pacing, futile attempts to distract myself with television, and making lists of potential suspects and motives. By Sunday night, I'd convinced myself of everyone's guilt at least once. Monday morning, I received a text from Allison. Security reviewing camera footage today. Thomas seems nervous. Call me, I called immediately. What do you mean Thomas seems nervous? He's been strange all morning, she explained in a hushed voice. When Richard mentioned reviewing the security footage from Wednesday, Thomas tried to say there was a system glitch that night. A glitch? That's convenient. Exactly. But Richard insisted they review what was available. Thomas Reed had been Meridian's head of security for only 8 months. He'd come highly recommended from another financial institution, but I realized I knew very little about him. Has he been involved in any previous security incidents? Could he have orchestrated this? Allison, does Thomas have a history with any of the executives? Any prior connections? Not that I know of, she paused. Wait, I think he and Patricia knew each other before. They went to the same college or something. I remember them mentioning it at the Christmas party. Patricia Donovan, our CFO. The pieces started shifting in my mind. Patricia had been pushing for cost-cutting measures in recent months, and my department had pushed back on several of her proposals, arguing they would compromise service quality. She'd been noticeably cold toward me in recent meetings. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Has Patricia been acting differently? Now that you mention it, she's been closed up in her office most of the morning, and she canceled 2 budget meetings today. My doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. I need to go, Allison. Keep me posted. I opened the door to find Detective Coleman and Officer Rivera on my doorstep. Mr. Carson, we need to speak with you again, Coleman said, his expression unreadable. My heart sank. Have you found something? Let's talk inside. I led them to my living room, bracing for the worst. We've reviewed the security footage from Wednesday evening, Coleman began. There's something you should know. I held my breath, waiting for the blow to fall. The footage shows someone entering the office using your ID badge at 7:05 p.m. and accessing the safe approximately 10 minutes later. However, he paused, watching me carefully. The person on the footage is definitely not you. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by confusion. Then who was it? We were hoping you could help with that. The individual was wearing a hoodie and kept their face angled away from the cameras. They clearly knew where the blind spots were in the security system. An inside job, I murmured. That's our working theory. Whoever did this had intimate knowledge of Meridian's security protocols. Officer Rivera spoke up. We've also found something unusual in the access logs. Your code was used, but there was a secondary override code entered immediately after, the kind typically used by security personnel when a primary code fails. Thomas Reed. It had to be. As head of security, he would have override capabilities for all access points in the building. I think I might know who's behind this, I said slowly. I explained my suspicions about Thomas and his possible connection to Patricia. Coleman listened intently, taking notes. We'll look into it, he promised. In the meantime, Meridian has agreed to lift your suspension, though you'll be on administrative duty until the investigation concludes. After they left, I called Allison with the update. They found footage of someone using my badge, but it wasn't me. I'm coming back tomorrow, but on administrative duty. That's great news. Well, partly great. Any idea who it could be? I have my suspicions. Listen, when I come in tomorrow, I need you to help me access the complete security logs from the past month. I think there might be a pattern we're missing. The logs are on Thomas's secure server. I don't have access. You don't, but James Wilson does. As head of accounting, He audits the security expenditures quarterly. He'll have login credentials. Mitch, that's risky. If Thomas is involved and catches us, I know, but it's the only way to clear my name completely. The next morning, I returned to Meridian, ignoring the stares and whispers from colleagues. Allison met me at my temporary workspace, a small desk in the records department far from my usual office. I spoke with James, she whispered. He's willing to help. He never believed you took the money. James met us during lunch break, slipping me a folded piece of paper. Server credentials, he explained quietly. I've alerted our IT team to a routine audit of security expenses, so they won't flag any unusual access. You have about 2 hours before Thomas typically reviews the daily security logs. With Allison keeping watch, I logged into Thomas's secure server. The security logs were comprehensive, tracking every badge swipe, camera activation, and alarm. System check. I focused on the previous 2 months, downloading the data to a secure drive. Back in the records room, I analyzed the information, looking for patterns. It didn't take long to find something suspicious. For the past 7 weeks, Thomas's override code had been used after hours at least twice weekly, often followed by access to executives' offices, including Patricia's. Even more telling, on 3 occasions prior to the theft, my badge had been briefly activated after hours, almost as if someone was testing whether they could use it without triggering alerts. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Thomas appeared to be conducting unauthorized access throughout the building, and someone, likely Thomas himself, had been planning to use my credentials for weeks. But why frame me specifically? And was Patricia involved, or was her office being accessed without her knowledge? I needed more concrete evidence before taking this to Detective Coleman. According to the logs, Thomas typically used his override between 7 and 8 p.m. It was currently 3:30 p.m. If his pattern held, I might have a chance to catch him in the act. I texted Allison, "Need to stay late. Can you create a diversion around 6:45 to keep the security desk occupied?" Her reply came quickly. "Fire alarm in East Wing? That would trigger protocols requiring security personnel to verify all zones." Perfect. I'll position myself to observe the executive floor. The afternoon crawled by. At 6:30, most employees had left for the day. I concealed myself in a rarely used supply closet near the executive offices, leaving the door cracked open, just enough to see the corridor and Patricia's office. At 6:43, the fire alarm blared. I heard security personnel rushing past, following evacuation protocols. Minutes later, as expected, Thomas appeared in the corridor. He moved quickly, glancing around before using his key card on Patricia's door. I waited 30 seconds, then slipped out of the closet and approached the office. Through the partially open blinds, I could see Thomas at Patricia's computer, downloading files onto a flash drive. I needed witnesses. I texted Detective Coleman, who had given me his direct number. Thomas Reed accessing CFO's computer unauthorized. Executive floor at Meridian. Evidence of possible corporate espionage. While waiting for a response, I noticed another figure approaching from the opposite end of the corridor, Patricia herself. She entered her office without knocking. "Did you get them?" I heard her ask Thomas. "All the files. Once these are delivered, our payment will be transferred offshore." "And the missing money?" A perfect distraction. Everyone's so focused on the theft that no one's paying attention to the data we're actually taking. I was wrong. This wasn't just about framing me for theft. It was industrial espionage. The theft was a smokescreen for something much bigger. I backed away slowly, planning to find security personnel, when my phone buzzed loudly. Both Thomas and Patricia froze, then rushed to the door. "Carson." Thomas's face contorted with rage when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" "Uncovering the truth," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "The police are on their way. It's over." Thomas lunged forward, grabbing my shirt collar and slamming me against the wall. You have no idea what you're involved in. Patricia appeared behind him, eyes darting nervously. We need to go. Now. Not without dealing with him first. Thomas reached into his jacket. Before he could withdraw whatever he was reaching for, shouts echoed from the stairwell. Police! Don't move! Detective Coleman and 4 officers rushed into the corridor, weapons drawn. Hands where we can see them, Coleman ordered. Thomas released me, slowly raising his hands. Patricia's face had drained of all color. Mitchell. Carson, Coleman said formally. Step away from them, please. As I moved toward the officers, I explained what I'd overheard. Coleman nodded, directing his officers to secure Thomas and Patricia. We received multiple tips about suspicious activities here, Coleman explained as his team searched for the suspects. Your text confirmed we were on the right track. The flash drive was recovered from Thomas's pocket, along with a small handgun. Patricia's computer showed evidence of accessing proprietary client data, information that would be invaluable to competitors. In the security office, the missing $75,000 was discovered hidden in a ventilation panel. Thomas had never intended to take it off-site. It was merely a diversion to focus the investigation on me while they completed their real mission: corporate espionage. As I watched them being led away in handcuffs, I felt a strange mixture of relief and lingering anger. My reputation had been weaponized against me, used as a convenient scapegoat in their scheme. Detective Coleman approached, offering me a tired smile. Good work, Mr. Carson. Your observations were crucial to breaking this case. Who were they working for? We'll find out. Initial evidence suggests a competitor hired them to extract client data and investment strategies. The theft accusation against you was designed to create chaos and distract from their real activities. I nodded, still processing everything that had happened. What happens now? There will be formal statements, probably court appearances down the line. But for tonight, go home. Get some rest. You've earned it. As I gathered my belongings, Richard Blackwell appeared, his face drawn with concern and embarrassment. Mitchell, I owe you an apology. We should have trusted you more. You followed the evidence you had, I replied, too exhausted to hold a grudge. We'd like you back at your regular position tomorrow. And that promotion we discussed? It's yours if you want it. I considered this. Despite everything, I loved my work at Meridian. But the events of the past few days had shown me how quickly everything could change, how fragile trust could be. I'll think about it, I said finally. As I drove home that evening, the weight of the accusation finally lifting from my shoulders, I reflected on how differently things might have gone without the security footage, without Allison's help, without my own determination to uncover the truth. Sometimes being accused of something you didn't do becomes the catalyst that reveals a deeper truth, not just about the situation, but about who you can really trust when everything is on the line. The next morning, I woke to sunlight, streaming through my blinds and the unfamiliar sensation of hope. For the first time in days, I wasn't a suspected thief. I showered, dressed in my best suit, and headed to Meridian with a renewed sense of purpose. The office atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Where there had been suspicious glances and hushed conversations, I now received smiles, congratulations, and even a few apologies. News traveled fast. Everyone knew about Thomas and Patricia's arrests and my role in uncovering their scheme. Richard Blackwell called an emergency company meeting at 9 a.m. The large conference room was packed with employees from every department crowded together, anticipation hanging in the air. Yesterday we uncovered something disturbing, Richard began, his voice grave. 2 of our most trusted executives were engaged in corporate espionage. They attempted to frame Mitchell Carson for theft to divert attention from their activities. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Richard continued. Thanks to Mitchell's determination and sharp investigative work, They were caught before they could deliver sensitive client data to our competitors. All eyes turned to me, standing awkwardly near the back of the room. Richard gestured for me to join him at the front. Mitchell has demonstrated extraordinary loyalty to Meridian, even when we failed to show the same loyalty to him. I've asked him to take on the position of regional director, effective immediately. Applause erupted. I smiled uncomfortably, still processing everything. Just days ago, these same people had believed me capable of theft. Now I was being celebrated as a hero. After the meeting, Allison caught up with me in the hallway. Regional director? That's incredible, Mitch. I haven't accepted yet, I admitted. I'm still thinking about it. She looked surprised. Why wouldn't you? It's a huge promotion. A lot has happened. I need to consider what's best for me moving forward. Well, whatever you decide, you deserve it. I always knew you were innocent. You were one of the few, I said, grateful for her unwavering support. I wouldn't have figured this out without your help. Back in my restored office, I found Detective Coleman waiting. Congratulations on the promotion offer, he said, shaking my hand. Word travels fast. In cases like this, it always does. He handed me a folder. Thought you might want to know what we've uncovered so far. The folder contained preliminary investigation findings. Thomas Reed had a history of security positions at financial institutions, each stint lasting less than a year before he moved on. There were no formal complaints or charges against him, but the pattern was suspicious in retrospect. Patricia Donovan had significant gambling debts, over $300,000 owed to various casinos and private lenders. She had been facing mounting pressure to pay, including veiled threats. Their confession revealed they had been hired by Zenith Financial Group, one of Meridian's main competitors, to extract client investment strategies and portfolio data. The payment would have cleared Patricia's debts with enough left over for both to disappear to non-extradition countries. They were desperate and got sloppy, Coleman explained. Framing you was Patricia's idea. She knew you were being considered for promotion and saw an opportunity to eliminate competition while creating a distraction. How did they get my access code and badge? Thomas installed keyloggers on select company computers months ago. He captured your credentials and created a duplicate of your badge using equipment from the security office. I shook my head, disgusted at how thoroughly they had violated the company's trust, and mine personally. We're continuing to investigate, but executives at Zenith are already lawyering up. This scandal will likely take down several key players there. Coleman stood to leave. You should be proud, Mr. Carson. Your persistence broke this case wide open. After he left, I sat at my desk, staring at the folder. The details still felt surreal, like something from a thriller movie rather than my actual life. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. James Wilson, the head of accounting, entered looking concerned. Mitchell, do you have a minute? Of course, James. What's up? He closed the door and sat down. There's something you should know about the financial records Patricia was handling. What? About them? I've been auditing her recent work, and I've found discrepancies dating back almost a year. He placed a spreadsheet on my desk. Small amounts diverted from various accounts, disguised as processing fees or administrative costs. I studied the document, noting the pattern of small transactions. $500 here, $200 there, accumulating to nearly $200,000 over 10 months. This wasn't just about selling data to Zenith, James continued. Patricia was embezzling long before Thomas came on board. Does Richard know? Not yet. I wanted to verify everything first and thought you should be informed, given your involvement in the case. This revelation complicated matters. If Patricia had been stealing from Meridian for nearly a year, who else might have known? Who might have benefited? The corporate espionage plot suddenly seemed like just the surface of a deeper corruption. We need to tell Richard, but first I want to check something, I said, turning to my computer. Can you pull up Patricia's hiring records and performance reviews? James used his administrative access to retrieve the files. Patricia had been with Meridian for 4 years, recruited directly by Richard from another financial institution. Her performance reviews were consistently excellent, with substantial bonuses approved each year, primarily by Richard himself. They worked closely on several major acquisitions, James noted. Richard always insisted Patricia handle the financial due diligence personally. A disquieting thought formed in my mind. What if Richard knew about Patricia's activities? What if he had been involved somehow? His quick decision to promote me suddenly seemed less like recognition and more like an attempt to buy my loyalty in silence. James, I need you to keep this between us for now. Continue your audit, but don't report to anyone else. You don't think Richard? I don't know what to think yet. But until we have more information, we need to be careful. After James left, I received a text from an unknown number. Need to talk about PR and Thomas. Parking garage, level 3, 7. PM come alone. V. Vanessa Harper, our HR director. Why the secrecy? Why not simply come to my office or call? I debated whether to go. After everything that had happened, a mysterious meeting in a parking garage seemed like an obvious trap. But Vanessa had always been professional, if not particularly warm. What could she know about Patricia and Thomas? Curiosity won out. At 6:55 p.m., I made my way to the nearly empty parking garage. Level 3 was dimly lit, with just a few cars scattered across the concrete expanse. I stood near my car, keys in hand, ready for a quick escape if necessary. At exactly 7, Vanessa's silver Audi pulled up. She stepped out, looking anxiously around before approaching me. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I couldn't risk being seen talking to you at the office." "What's going on, Vanessa?" She glanced around again. "I'm afraid Richard isn't being entirely forthcoming about this situation." "You mean Patricia and Thomas?" "I mean the entire corporate culture at Meridian." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of emails. These are communications between Richard, Patricia, and executives at Zenith from 2 years ago. They were planning a merger that would have made them all extremely wealthy while eliminating hundreds of jobs. I scrolled through the emails, noting the calculating tone and casual disregard for employees' livelihoods. Why didn't the merger happen? The board rejected it after I anonymously leaked concerns about antitrust issues. Richard never discovered who sabotaged his plans. So you think Patricia and Thomas's espionage was related to this old merger attempt? I think Patricia got greedy and decided to make her own deal with Zenith when the legitimate one fell through. Richard may not have known about her selling data, but he's been turning a blind eye to financial irregularities for years. This aligned with what James had shown me earlier. "Why are you telling me this?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "Because Richard is positioning you as the new golden boy, the hero who saved Meridian. He's going to use you to rebuild the company's image while continuing business as usual behind the scenes. You want me to refuse the promotion?" "I want you to accept it," she said, surprising me. "And then help me clean up this company from the inside. You have credibility now that I don't. Together, we could force real change." I studied her face, searching for signs of deception. "How do I know I can trust you? How do I know this isn't another setup?" "You don't. Just like I don't know if I can trust you." She held my gaze steadily. "But someone has to take a risk if anything is going to change." She handed me a flash drive. "These are documents I've collected over the past 3 years. Evidence of questionable decisions, unethical practices, and possibly illegal activities sanctioned by Richard and the executive team. Review them, verify them independently, and then decide." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Why me? Why now?" "Because you've proven you're willing to stand up against corruption, even at personal cost." She smiled sadly. and because I'm tired of being complicit in something I know is wrong. That night, I reviewed the files Vanessa had provided. They painted a disturbing picture of Meridian's operations: aggressive foreclosures during the financial crisis, predatory lending practices targeting vulnerable communities, manipulated risk assessments to secure higher fees. Richard Blackwell appeared repeatedly, authorizing decisions that prioritized profit over ethics. I cross-referenced key documents with public records and found the information accurate. If released, these documents could destroy Meridian and lead to criminal charges for several executives, including Richard. The next morning, I accepted the regional director position. Richard seemed pleased, clapping me on the shoulder like a proud father. "You won't regret this, Mitchell. This is the beginning of a prosperous partnership." "I'm looking forward to bringing positive changes to the company," I replied carefully. Of course. Some modernization is necessary, but we shouldn't fix what isn't broken, eh?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. Over the next 2 weeks, I settled into my new role while quietly gathering additional information. James continued his audit, uncovering more financial discrepancies. Vanessa provided internal communications, showing Richard's awareness of Patricia's embezzlement scheme as far back as 8 months ago. I also learned that Thomas Reed had been hired specifically on Patricia's recommendation, unusual for a security position, but approved without question by Richard. Had he suspected their eventual betrayal, or had he simply lost control of his co-conspirators? The investigation into Patricia and Thomas progressed. They both accepted plea deals, providing evidence against Zenith executives in exchange for reduced sentences. Neither implicated Richard in any wrongdoing, which seemed suspicious given the evidence Vanessa and I had uncovered. 3 weeks after my promotion, Richard called me into his office late on a Friday afternoon. "Mitchell, I've been impressed with your transition into leadership," he began, gesturing for me to sit. "Your department reorganization proposals show foresight." "Thank you. I believe transparency and ethical practices are essential for long-term growth." Something flickered across his face. Annoyance? Concern? Yes, well, business realities sometimes require flexibility in those areas. I disagree. Integrity should never be flexible. Richard's cordial mask slipped slightly. "You sound like Vanessa. Always the idealist." "Is that a problem?" "Not at all," he recovered smoothly. "Different perspectives strengthen our leadership team. Speaking of which, I'd like you to join me for a private meeting with our major shareholders next weekend. My lake house in the Berkshires. Very exclusive." I recognized the invitation for what it was, an attempt to bring me into the inner circle, to make me complicit in whatever was happening at the highest levels of Meridian. "I'd be honored," I lied. Richard smiled. "Excellent. We'll discuss the future direction of Meridian. I think you'll find our vision lucrative for everyone involved." That evening, I met with Vanessa at a small coffee shop miles from the office. "He's invited me to the shareholders' meeting at his lake house," I told her. "That's where they make the real decisions," she confirmed. "If you go, you'll either become one of them or become a threat to them." I need to know how deep this goes before we take action. "It's dangerous, Mitchell. These people have resources and connections. They could destroy your career, or worse." "They already tried to destroy my career," I reminded her. "I need concrete evidence linking Richard to these unethical practices. Something that will stand up in court and in the court of public opinion. And if you get that evidence, then we take it to the authorities and the board simultaneously. Make it impossible to sweep under the rug." The following Friday, I packed for the weekend at Richard's lake house. I included small recording devices, provided by Detective Coleman, with whom I had shared some of our concerns. While not enough for official action yet, the information had convinced him to provide limited assistance. "Be careful," Coleman had warned. "Without official sanction, I can't protect you if things go wrong." The drive to the Berkshires took nearly 3 hours. Richard's lake house turned out to be a sprawling estate on private land, with manicured grounds and a boathouse larger than my apartment. 6 other vehicles were already parked in the curved driveway, luxury cars with tinted windows and discreet security features. Richard greeted me at the door, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Mitchell, welcome to my humble retreat." Inside, I was introduced to the other guests, 3 Meridian board members, 2 major shareholders, and surprisingly, the CEO of Zenith Financial Group, the very competitor that had allegedly hired Patricia and Thomas for corporate espionage. Bradford. "And I go way back," Richard explained, noticing my confusion as he introduced Zenith's CEO. "Competitors in public, friends in private. That's how this business really works." The evening proceeded with expensive wine, gourmet food, and carefully superficial conversation. No one mentioned the recent scandal or the arrests. It was as if they had never happened, or as if they had been planned all along. After dinner, Richard invited everyone to the wood-paneled study for cigars and brandy. The real meeting was about to begin. "Gentlemen," Richard said once everyone was seated, "we're at a crucial juncture for both Meridian and Zenith. The unfortunate incident with Patricia and Thomas has accelerated our timeline." Bradford nodded. "The board is pressuring me to step down. The scandal has created the perfect pretext." "Precisely as we anticipated," Richard agreed. "The regulatory scrutiny will be intense but temporary. Meanwhile, the groundwork for our merger can proceed under the guise of new leadership and corporate reform." I struggled to maintain a neutral expression. The corporate espionage scandal hadn't been a betrayal. It had been a calculated move in a larger game. "Mitchell here will be instrumental in the next phase," Richard continued, gesturing toward me. "His reputation as the whistleblower who uncovered corruption makes him the ideal public face for our reformed corporate culture." "Can he be trusted?" one of the shareholders asked bluntly. Richard smiled. "Mitchell understands opportunity. Don't you, Mitchell?" All eyes turned to me. This was the moment of truth. Either convince them I was corruptible or expose myself as a threat to their plans. "I understand that traditional banking is changing," I said carefully. "Adaptation is necessary for survival." "Well put," Richard raised his glass. "To adapt and mutual prosperity." As the others drank, Bradford approached me. "Richard speaks highly of your analytical skills. We'll need those as we integrate our operations post-merger." "The merger is definitely moving forward then?" I asked. "With appropriate concessions to regulators, yes. Patricia and Thomas have served their purpose, convenient scapegoats for any irregularities that might be discovered during due diligence." "And the missing client data?" I probed. Bradford chuckled. "Never actually left the building. The whole charade was designed to create a controlled scandal that we could resolve neatly while distracting from the merger preparations." "Very clever," I said, fighting to hide my disgust. "The best deceptions contain elements of truth," Bradford replied. "Patricia was stealing. That part was real. Thomas was helping her, also real. We simply directed their existing corruption toward our ends." As the night progressed, more details emerged. The merger had been planned for over 2 years. Patricia and Thomas had indeed been selling information and embezzling funds, but their activities had been monitored and ultimately weaponized by Richard and Bradford. My framing had been an unexpected opportunity, Patricia's initiative that worked perfectly into their larger scheme. By midnight, I had recorded multiple conversations implicating both CEOs and several board members in fraud, market manipulation, and conspiracy. The evidence was damning, far beyond what Vanessa and I had previously gathered. As the meeting concluded, Richard pulled me aside. "You've been quiet tonight? Processing everything?" "It's a lot to take in," I admitted. "Not what I expected when I accepted the promotion. This is the real executive level, Mitchell. not the sanitized version in business textbooks. He studied my face. Having second thoughts? Just considering how best to position myself in the new structure. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. Smart. Self-interest is the only reliable motivation. He clapped my shoulder. Get some rest. Tomorrow we discuss specifics, including your considerable compensation package. In my assigned guest room, I carefully transferred the recordings to encrypted storage and sent copies to 3 separate secure locations. If anything happened to me, the evidence would still come to light. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Updates? I replied simply, worse than we thought. Full conspiracy. Have evidence. Her response came quickly. Be careful. Coming back tomorrow? First thing in the morning. We'll contact Coleman on the way. I set my phone aside and lay down, mind racing with everything I'd learned. The company I'd dedicated 6 years to was built on corruption and deception. The executives I'd respected were calculating criminals, and I had been selected as their newest conspirator, or their next victim. Sleep eluded me as I contemplated what the morning would bring. One thing was certain: Meridian Financial Services would never be the same again, and neither would I. Dawn broke over the Berkshires, painting the lake in shimmering gold. I'd managed perhaps 3 hours of fitful sleep, my mind churning with the revelations from the previous night. I showered and dressed quickly, packing my overnight bag and checking that my recordings were secure. The house was quiet as I made my way downstairs. In the kitchen, I found a housekeeper preparing coffee. Good morning, sir. The others won't. Be up for hours. Would you like breakfast? Just coffee, thank you. I need to head back to the city early. Unexpected work matter. She nodded, unsurprised. Mr. Blackwell said someone might need to leave early. There's a packaged breakfast in the refrigerator if you'd like to take it with you. Richard had anticipated I might try to leave. That wasn't reassuring. I accepted the coffee but declined the food, making an excuse about meeting someone for brunch. As I headed toward the front door, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Leaving so soon, Mitchell? Richard stood on the landing, already dressed in casual slacks and a polo shirt, looking remarkably alert for the early hour. Client emergency, I lied smoothly. Henderson account is having issues with their portfolio transfer. Dutiful as always. Richard descended the remaining stairs. Let me walk you out. We stepped onto the wide veranda overlooking the lake. The morning was beautiful, making the corruption we'd discussed last night seem surreal. Your input was valuable last night, Richard said. The others were impressed. I'm still processing everything, to be honest. Understandable. It's a significant paradigm shift. He studied me carefully. You know, Mitchell, I've always believed that people fall into 2 categories: those who follow rules and those who recognize that rules are merely suggestions for the masses. And which am I? That's what I'm trying to determine. Richard smiled thinly. You've shown remarkable adaptability these past weeks. From suspected thief to celebrated hero to potential conspirator, you've navigated each role convincingly. Survival. Instinct, I replied, matching his casual tone while my pulse quickened. Indeed. Which makes me wonder, what role are you truly playing now? The question hung between us, charged with suspicion. I maintained eye contact, fighting the urge to look away. The role that benefits me most long-term, I said finally. Isn't that what you'd expect? Richard laughed, tension momentarily broken. Well answered. Self-interest I understand and respect. He clapped my shoulder. Drive safely. We'll continue our discussions Monday. As I walked to my car, I felt his eyes tracking me. Starting the engine, I expected some last-minute intervention, security appearing to detain me, perhaps. But nothing happened. Richard simply waved as I pulled away. Once beyond the property's gates, I pulled over and called Detective Coleman. I have recordings implicating Richard Blackwell, Bradford Hayes from Zenith, and several board members in fraud and conspiracy, I told him without preamble. The entire corporate espionage scenario was orchestrated to facilitate their merger while providing scapegoats for financial irregularities. Are you somewhere safe? Coleman asked immediately. Driving back from Richard's lake house, about 3 hours from the city. Don't go to your apartment or the office. Meet me at the secondary location we discussed. The secondary location was a nondescript diner in Queens where Coleman had once mentioned having breakfast with his daughter. It was public enough to be safe but removed from our usual environments. As I drove, I called Vanessa. Operation is bigger than we thought. Richard and Bradford Hayes from Zenith planned everything, including Patricia and Thomas taking the fall. That explains why Richard was so quick to promote you, Vanessa said, controlling the narrative. I have recordings from last night. Meeting Coleman at 10:30 to hand them over. Can you meet us? I'll be there. And Mitchell? Be careful. If Richard suspects anything, I know. Watch your back, too. I ended the call and focused on driving, checking my rearview mirror frequently for signs of pursuit. The morning traffic was light, allowing me to make good time toward the city. My phone rang again, a Meridian number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, a text arrived from the same number. Mitchell, this is James. Urgent. Call the secure line immediately. James Wilson from accounting? What could be so urgent on a Saturday morning? I pulled into a rest stop and returned the call from a payphone, using the secure line code we'd established earlier. Mitchell? Thank God, James answered, his voice tight with stress. Where are you? On my way back to the city. What's happening? Its security detected unauthorized access to financial records last night. My access credentials. Someone's setting me up just like they did you. My blood ran cold. Are you at the office? Yes. I came in to run some numbers and security was waiting. They're reviewing surveillance footage now. Mitchell, I think they know what we've been investigating. Listen carefully. Gather whatever evidence you can access and leave immediately. Don't go home. Go to... I paused, suddenly wary. What if this call was being monitored? What if James had been coerced? The place where we first discussed Patricia's discrepancies, I said instead. 3 hours from now. Understood, James replied. Be careful, Mitchell. This goes deeper than we thought. Back on the road, my mind raced. If they were moving against James, others might be at risk too. I tried calling Allison but got no answer. Vanessa's phone went straight to voicemail. Coleman wasn't picking up either. Had I underestimated Richard? Was he already moving to neutralize potential threats? I abandoned my original route, taking secondary roads and changing direction several times to ensure I wasn't being followed. Instead of heading directly to the diner in Queens, I drove to a shopping mall in New Jersey, parked in the crowded lot, and entered through a department store. From a store phone, I called a longtime friend who owed me a favor. Ryan, I need to borrow your car for the day. It's important. Mitch? What's going on? I'll explain later. Can you meet me at Riverside Mall in 20 minutes? Bring your car, park in Section C. Ryan agreed, asking no further questions. While waiting, I purchased a prepaid phone, a baseball cap, and a lightweight jacket different from what I'd been wearing. Simple disguise elements, but enough to change my silhouette on surveillance cameras. Ryan arrived on time, looking concerned. Are you in some kind of trouble? Corporate politics gone ugly, I said, downplaying the situation. Need to stay off the radar for a few hours. We swapped car keys, and I thanked him profusely. I'll get it back to you by tonight. If anyone asks about me, you haven't heard from me in days. In Ryan's sedan, I felt marginally safer. I checked the time, 9:45 a.m. The meeting with Coleman was in 45 minutes, but I was still wary about heading directly there. I used the prepaid phone to call a number I knew would be secure. My ex-wife Elaine's sister, a federal prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. Sophia, it's Mitchell Carson. I need your guidance on a sensitive matter. Mitchell, this is unexpected. I've uncovered major financial fraud and conspiracy at Meridian. Recordings of executives admitting to criminal activities. Local detectives may be compromised. Need federal involvement. Sophia's tone shifted from surprise to professional focus. Where are you now? Moving. Planning to meet Detective Coleman. From the 34th Precinct at 10:30. Don't. If he's compromised, you're walking into a trap. Go to the federal building in Manhattan. Ask for Agent Diaz, Financial Crimes. I'll call ahead. Thank you, Sophia. Mitchell, she added before I could hang up. If what you're saying is true, these people won't hesitate to protect themselves. Be extremely cautious. I changed course, heading toward Manhattan. Traffic was heavier now, providing better cover but slowing my progress. I kept checking mirrors, watching for vehicles that might be following. At 10:28, my prepaid phone buzzed, with a text from Vanessa, at diner. No sign of Coleman. Multiple Meridian security vehicles in the area. Stay away. So Richard had moved faster than anticipated. Was Coleman compromised, or were they tracking Vanessa? Either way, my original plan was blown. I texted back, go to the federal building in Manhattan. Ask for Agent Diaz. I'll meet you there. Near the federal building, I parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, staying vigilant. The lobby security was thorough, but efficient. I explained I had an appointment with Agent Diaz, and after verification, was escorted to a secure floor. Agent Luisa Diaz was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with no patience for preliminaries. Sophia briefed me. Do you have evidence of financial crimes? I handed over the encrypted drive containing the recordings. Executives from Meridian Financial and Zenith Group discussing fraud, market manipulation, and using employees as scapegoats for their activities. There's more evidence, financial records showing embezzlement patterns, communications detailing their plan. Who else knows about this? Vanessa Harper from Meridian HR. She should be on her way here. James Wilson from accounting. Status unknown. Detective Marcus Coleman was investigating but may be compromised. Agent Diaz nodded to a colleague who immediately left the room, presumably to verify these individuals. We'll need a complete statement, Mr. Carson. This could take several hours. I understand. But there's urgency. They're already moving to eliminate evidence and potential witnesses. We'll handle that aspect. Your primary concern should be your own safety until we can establish protective measures. Over the next 4 hours, I provided a comprehensive statement detailing everything from my initial accusation to the lake house revelations. Halfway through, Vanessa arrived, visibly shaken. They were waiting at the diner, she confirmed. Meridian security and 2 men I didn't recognize. I spotted them before going inside. Any sign of Coleman? No, and he's not answering calls. Agent Diaz interjected. We've contacted Detective Coleman's precinct. He called in sick this morning. Unusual. For him, according to his supervisor. A chill ran through me. Could they have gotten to him? We're sending officers to his residence now, Diaz assured us. In the meantime, we need to locate James Wilson. James had still not appeared at our backup meeting location. Calls to his phone went unanswered. His wife reported he'd left for the office early, but hadn't returned or called. By late afternoon, the situation had escalated significantly. Federal agents had obtained emergency warrants to secure Meridian's financial records and servers. Teams were being assembled to arrest Richard Blackwell and the board members implicated in my recordings. What about Bradford Hayes and Zenith? I asked. Separate team, Diaz explained. Simultaneous execution to prevent any warning. A junior agent entered the room, speaking quietly to Diaz. Her expression turned grim. They've found Detective Coleman, she told me. Single gunshot wound made to look like suicide. He's in critical condition at Mercy Hospital. The news hit like a physical blow. Coleman had been helping me unofficially, risking his career, perhaps now his life, to expose corruption. "This is officially a multi-agency investigation now," Diaz said. "FBI, SEC, financial crimes, full task force. You and Ms. Harper will be placed in protective custody until arrests are made." "What about James?" Vanessa asked, voicing my own concern. "We're doing everything possible to locate him. His phone last pinged near Meridian's downtown office 6 hours ago, then went offline." The implications were disturbing. If they had harmed James or Coleman, how far would they go to protect themselves? As evening approached, we were moved to a secure location, a nondescript hotel under federal protection. Vanessa and I were given adjoining rooms with agents stationed in the corridor. "Try to rest," Diaz advised. "Tomorrow will be intense. The arrests are scheduled for 6 a.m. Rest seemed impossible under the circumstances. I paced my hotel room, replaying events in my mind, questioning whether I could have predicted Richard's response or moved faster to protect my allies. Around midnight, my secure phone, provided by the agents, rang. It was Diaz. "We found James Wilson," she said without preamble. "Is he—" I couldn't finish the question. "Alive, but injured. He was found in a maintenance corridor at Meridian, unconscious from what appears to be a severe beating. He's been transported to the same hospital as Detective Coleman." Relief mingled with anger. "Will he recover?" "Doctors are optimistic. He regained consciousness briefly and confirmed he was attacked by security personnel when they caught him, accessing restricted financial records. This adds assault charges to our case." "Have you located Richard Blackwell?" A pause. "That's the other reason I'm calling. Blackwell's gone. His house is empty, the security system disabled. His private jet filed a flight plan for Switzerland 3 hours ago. He's running," I realized. "He must have suspected I recorded the lake house meeting. We've alerted Swiss authorities and frozen all Meridian-related accounts we can identify. But Blackwell has extensive connections and resources." "Bradford Hayes?" "Under surveillance. He doesn't appear to be fleeing, which is interesting. We're monitoring all Zenith executives." After the call ended, I sat on the edge of the bed, processing the implications. Richard had abandoned his co-conspirators, choosing self-preservation over loyalty. Would the others turn on him to save themselves? Would they implicate me somehow in their schemes? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I opened the door to find Vanessa, looking exhausted but determined. "I heard about James," she said, "and Richard escaping." "News travels fast," Agent Stafford told me. She gestured to one of our protection details. "Mitchell, there's something else you should know." I invited her in, closing the door. "What is it?" "I've been communicating with a journalist, anonymously, through secure channels. Sharing some of what we discovered, not the recordings or specifics, just enough to get them investigating." "That's risky, Vanessa. It's insurance. If anything happens to the federal case, the story still breaks." She met my gaze. "I didn't tell the agents. I wasn't sure how they'd react." I understood her reasoning. Even with federal protection, we remained vulnerable. Richard's escape proved that. Having the story in multiple hands increased the chances of the truth emerging. "Who's the journalist?" "Charlotte West at the National Financial Review. She's been investigating Zenith for months already. Something about irregularities in their Asian markets division. Our information filled in crucial gaps." Charlotte West was a respected investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. Her involvement added another layer of protection and pressure on our enemies. "Good thinking," I acknowledged. "When is she publishing?" "Monday morning edition, unless we tell her to hold off." That gave us less than 36 hours before the story became public, regardless of how the federal arrests proceeded. We should inform Agent Diaz, I decided. Better she hears it from us than being blindsided. Vanessa nodded in agreement. "I'll call Charlotte first to update her on Richards. Escape. It strengthens the story. As she made the call, I gazed out the hotel window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard Blackwell was likely still orchestrating his escape, calling in favors, transferring funds to untraceable accounts. The man who had once congratulated me for uncovering corruption was now fleeing justice for far greater crimes. The irony wasn't lost on me. What had begun with me being falsely accused of stealing from the company safe had evolved into one of the largest financial crime investigations in recent memory. Lives had been endangered, careers destroyed, and a respected financial institution revealed as a facade for criminal enterprise. When Vanessa finished her call, she joined me at the window. "Charlotte's running the story tomorrow night online, ahead of the print edition. She has sources confirming Richard boarded his plane, but suggesting it may not have followed its filed flight plan. He's creating confusion, buying time." "Exactly." She hesitated. "Mitchell, when this is over, what will you do? Meridian won't survive this scandal intact." It was a question I'd been avoiding. My career, built painstakingly over years, was inextricably linked to a company now synonymous with fraud. Start over, I suppose. Something smaller, more ethical. I turned from the window. "What about you?" "I've been offered a position with the SEC's compliance division. My background in HR and whistleblowing makes me an attractive candidate, apparently." "You'd be excellent at that," I said sincerely. We stood in comfortable silence, united by our shared ordeal and uncertain futures. Tomorrow would bring arrests, public revelations, and a media frenzy. Our lives would never return to normal. But perhaps they would become something better. "We should try to sleep," Vanessa suggested eventually. "Tomorrow will be chaotic." "You're right." I walked her to the door. "Vanessa, thank you for believing in me from the beginning, for taking risks to expose the truth. Thank you for having the courage to follow through," she replied. "Most people would have taken the promotion and looked the other way." After she left, I finally managed to sleep, exhaustion overcoming anxiety. My last thoughts were of James and Detective Coleman, fighting for recovery in hospital beds, paying a far higher price for integrity than I had. Morning would bring either justice or further challenges. Either way, the truth about Meridian Financial Services and my own role in exposing it would soon be known to the world. Sunday morning arrived with a flurry of activity. I was awakened at 5:30 a.m. by Agent Diaz, already in full tactical gear. "We're moving in 30 minutes, she announced, handing me a bulletproof vest. "You'll observe the Meridian arrests from a secure vehicle. Board members are being picked up at their homes simultaneously." "Any word on Richard Blackwell?" "His plane landed in Zurich, but he wasn't on it when Swiss authorities boarded. We believe he deplaned during a refueling stop in the Azores. Portuguese authorities are searching, but he has a significant head start." I dressed quickly, strapping on the heavy vest as instructed. In the hallway, Vanessa emerged from her room, similarly equipped, looking determined despite the early hour. "Ready for this?" I asked her. "Ready to see it end," she replied. We were escorted to an armored SUV with tinted windows, joining a convoy of federal vehicles. Dawn was just breaking over the city as we approached Meridian's headquarters. The building stood silent and imposing, in the early light, its glass facade reflecting the sunrise like flames. Agent Diaz briefed us from the front seat. "Teams are entering through multiple access points. We have warrants for all electronic systems, physical documents, and the arrests of 12 executives and board members." On her signal, agents poured into the building from several entrances. Even from our position across the street, we could see the organized precision of the operation. Security guards offered no resistance, stepping aside as federal agents secured the lobby. "Stafford team has secured the executive floor," came a voice over the radio. "No resistance. 4 targets in custody." Similar reports followed as teams located and arrested board members and executives throughout the building. Most had apparently come in early for an emergency meeting, likely called to discuss damage control after Richard's flight. "They're scrambling," Diaz observed. "Blackwell abandoned them, and now they're trying to save themselves." Within an hour, the arrests were complete. We watched as handcuffed executives were escorted to waiting vehicles, some looking shocked, others grimly resigned. Bradford Hayes, Zenith's CEO, was among them, his normally confident demeanor replaced by barely contained fury. As the convoy prepared to depart, Diaz received a call that made her expression tighten. "We need to go, now." Our driver immediately pulled away, taking an unexpected route. "What's happening?" Vanessa asked. "There's been a security breach. Someone leaked information about your protective detail and location." Diaz was already on her radio, issuing orders. "We're moving you to a different secure facility." "Who leaked it?" I demanded. "We don't know yet. Could be someone at the hotel, could be someone on the inside." She met my gaze. "Until we're certain, we're treating everyone outside this vehicle as potentially compromised." The implications were chilling. Even when Richard Blackwell fled, his influence remained. He had resources, connections, people willing to help him eliminate threats. Our new location was a safe house in a nondescript suburban neighborhood, a modest ranch-style home with reinforced doors and windows. Inside, it was sparsely furnished but functional, with a small operations center set up in what would normally be a dining room. "You'll stay here until we've processed the suspects and secured all evidence," Diaz explained. "Could be several days. I know it's not ideal, but it's necessary for your safety." "What about James and Detective Coleman?" Vanessa asked. "Both under guard at the hospital." Coleman regained consciousness briefly this morning. His first coherent statement was warning about a mole in the department. That explained why Coleman hadn't shown up at our meeting. He'd suspected his own colleagues might be compromised. "Does he know who?" I asked. "Not yet. He's still heavily sedated." Diaz checked her watch. "I need to get back to the field office. Agents Lewis and Chen will remain here with you. All communications go through them." After she left, Vanessa and I were shown to separate bedrooms and told to make ourselves comfortable. The house had no internet access and limited phone capability, security measures to prevent tracking. Agent Lewis, a stocky man with a perpetual frown, established clear boundaries. "You don't leave without an escort. All meals delivered here. All communications monitored. For your protection." It felt more like house arrest than protection, but given recent events, I understood the precautions. By afternoon, we were briefed on the morning's operations. All targeted executives had been arrested without incident. Seizure of Meridian's records was ongoing, with forensic accountants already discovering evidence of widespread fraud. Similar operations at Zenith's headquarters had yielded additional arrests and evidence. "Charlotte's story is running tonight," Vanessa reminded me as we picked at delivered sandwiches. "By morning, it'll be everywhere." "Good. Makes it harder for anyone to bury this." "But Richard is still out there," she said, quietly. "With his resources." She didn't need to finish the thought. As long as Richard Blackwell remained free, we weren't truly safe. Around 7 p.m., Agent Chen brought a laptop to the living room. Ms. West's article just went live. Thought you might want to see it. The headline blazed across the screen. "Banking. Conspiracy exposed. Meridian and Zenith executives arrested in massive fraud scheme." Charlotte West's reporting was comprehensive and damning. She detailed the fake corporate espionage plot, the planned merger, the systematized embezzlement, and Richard Blackwell's flight from justice. While she didn't name Vanessa or me as her sources, she referenced courageous whistleblowers who risked their lives to expose the corruption. The article included photos of the morning's arrests and profiles of key figures including Richard, Bradford Hayes, Patricia Donovan, and Thomas Reed. Most powerfully, it connected Meridian's fraud to real victims. Small businesses denied fair loans, homeowners foreclosed upon through manipulated terms, Employees terminated to hide financial irregularities. She did an excellent job, Vanessa said admiringly. Agent Chen nodded. Going to be impossible to sweep this under the rug now. Within hours. The story was picked up by major news outlets. Our phones, the secure ones provided by the FBI, buzzed constantly with notifications as the scandal exploded across media platforms. Market analysts predicted Meridian's stock would collapse. When markets opened Monday, financial regulators worldwide announced investigations into similar patterns at other institutions. Late that night, Agent Diaz called with an update. The arrests have already produced results. 3 board members are negotiating plea deals, offering evidence against Blackwell and each other. Honor among thieves, I commented dryly. Bradford Hayes is proving particularly cooperative, claims Blackwell masterminded everything and threatened him into compliance. That's convenient. Indeed. But he's providing actionable intelligence, including possible locations where Blackwell might seek refuge. International teams are following up. Monday morning brought news that the FBI had identified the leak in our protection detail. A junior agent whose gambling debts had made him vulnerable to bribery. He'd been arrested attempting to board a flight to Mexico. The breach has been contained, Diaz assured us, but we're maintaining your current security protocol for now. By afternoon, financial markets were in turmoil. Meridian's stock had been suspended after dropping 78% in the first hour of trading. Zenith faced a similar collapse. Banks worldwide were being scrutinized for comparable practices, creating ripple effects throughout the financial sector. I watched the coverage with mixed emotions. The institutions deserved their fate, but thousands of innocent employees would suffer the consequences. People like my former team members who had done nothing wrong. What happens to Meridian now? I asked Agent Lewis during a news broadcast. Regulators will likely place it in receivership. Core assets may be sold to other institutions. Criminal activity will be separated from legitimate business operations. And the employees? He shrugged. Some will transition to whatever entity takes over the legitimate business. Others will need to find new positions. Financial institutional failures always have casualties. That reality weighed on me. I had pursued justice, but at a tremendous cost to many who were innocent. Tuesday brought a significant breakthrough. James Wilson had recovered enough to provide a formal statement, confirming that Richard had personally ordered security to take care of him when he was caught accessing restricted records. That's attempted murder, Diaz explained over the phone. Combined with the attack on Detective Coleman, we've upgraded the charges against Blackwell to include violent crimes, which expands our international jurisdiction for his capture. Has Coleman identified the department mole? Yes. Lieutenant Sanders, his direct supervisor. Sanders was on Blackwell's payroll for years, feeding information about financial investigations, helping bury complaints against Meridian. The web of corruption was even more extensive than I'd imagined, reaching into law enforcement, possibly other regulatory bodies as well. How many people had Richard bought over the years? How many systems had he corrupted? On Wednesday morning, 5 days after I'd fled Richard's lake house with the damning recordings, we received the news we'd been waiting for. They've found Blackwell, Agent Chen announced, entering the living room with unusual energy. Moroccan authorities apprehended him boarding a private yacht in Tangier. He was traveling under a false identity, but facial recognition flagged him. Relief washed over me. Is he being extradited? Process is already underway. He'll be back on U.S. soil within 48 hours to face charges. Vanessa sank into a chair, visibly processing the news. It's really over then. The immediate danger, yes, Chen clarified. The legal proceedings will take years. You'll both be key witnesses in multiple trials. That evening, we were finally permitted a supervised visit to the hospital. James Wilson was awake and alert, though his battered face showed the brutality of his assault. His relief at seeing us was palpable. I thought they might have gotten to you too, he admitted. When I regained consciousness and heard about Coleman being shot. We got lucky, I acknowledged. Federal protection arrived just in time. James nodded toward his police guard at the door. Better late than never for me, too. Doctor says I can be discharged tomorrow. Any idea what you'll do next? Vanessa asked. Testify, obviously. After that, he shrugged, wincing at the movement. Start over somewhere else. My reputation in finance is probably shot. You're a whistleblower, I reminded him. That counts for something. In some circles, maybe? His expression turned serious. What about you two? Vanessa mentioned her potential SEC position. I admitted I hadn't decided yet. You should consider becoming a compliance consultant, James suggested. Companies will be desperate to prove they're not the next Meridian. Someone who helped expose major fraud would have credibility. The idea had merit. Using my experience to prevent similar corruption elsewhere appealed to me more than returning to traditional financial operations. Our next stop was Detective Coleman's room in the ICU. His condition had stabilized, but he remained critical. Unable to speak due to intubation, he communicated through written notes, his handwriting shaky but determined. Got the bastard? His first note asked. Blackwell's in custody, I confirmed. Being extradited now. Coleman's second note was more personal. Worth it, no regrets. His courage was humbling. He'd nearly died helping us expose the truth, yet considered the sacrifice worthwhile. Back at the safe house that night, I found myself unable to sleep despite the positive developments. Richard's capture should have brought closure, but instead, I felt increasingly restless. Something still didn't sit right. I reviewed mental notes of everything we'd learned. Richard had orchestrated the merger plan, using Patricia and Thomas as scapegoats. He'd fled when exposed, abandoning his co-conspirators. Standard self-preservation by a cornered criminal. But Richard hadn't become successful by panicking or abandoning well-laid plans. His escape seemed almost predetermined, as if he'd expected to be exposed eventually and had prepared accordingly. What if his capture in Morocco wasn't the end of the story? What if it was part of his plan too? The question nagged at me until I finally sought out Agent Lewis, on night duty in the operations center. I need to speak with Agent Diaz, I insisted. It's important. It's 2 a.m., Carson. Can it wait until morning? No, it really can't. Something in my tone convinced him. He placed the call and after a brief conversation, handed me the phone. This better be good, Diaz said, her voice rough with interrupted sleep. Richard Blackwell's capture was too easy, I stated without preamble. For someone with his resources and connections, being identified by standard facial recognition in a major port city, it doesn't make sense. He made a mistake. Even sophisticated, criminals get careless when they're desperate. Richard doesn't get careless, and he's never desperate. He's calculated. I took a deep breath. What if he wanted to be caught in Morocco? Why would he want that? Morocco has specific extradition limitations with the U.S. Certain white-collar crimes are treated differently under their legal framework. What if he's planning to challenge the extradition on technical grounds? There was a long pause before Diaz responded. That's actually a concern our legal team raised this afternoon. They're rushing the process to avoid giving his lawyers time to file in Moroccan courts. And his finances? Have you frozen everything? All known accounts, yes. But Blackwell has been moving money for months. Complex transactions through multiple jurisdictions. Our financial forensics team is still tracing it all. The picture was becoming clearer. He's planned for this contingency all along. The flight to Switzerland was a diversion. He probably has a substantial fortune hidden where you'll never find it, and legal strategies prepared for every scenario. What are you suggesting, Carson? That we can't touch him? I'm suggesting we need to look deeper. Richard would have contingency plans not just for himself, but for protecting the broader conspiracy. There could be evidence or accomplices we haven't identified yet. I'll have the team review everything with that perspective, Diaz promised. Get some sleep, Carson. We'll discuss this further in the morning. But sleep remained elusive. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still missing something fundamental about Richard's operations. The recorded conversations at the lake house had focused on the Meridian Zenith merger, but there had been oblique references to other projects, other partnerships. What if Meridian and Zenith were just components of a larger financial conspiracy? By morning, my concerns had crystallized into a coherent theory. When Diaz arrived at the safe house for our scheduled briefing, I was ready. Richard Blackwell isn't just a corrupt CEO, I explained, spreading out notes I'd made overnight. He's part of a network of financial manipulators across multiple institutions. The Meridian Zenith merger was just one operation among many. Diaz studied my notes, her expression thoughtful. You're suggesting a cartel-like structure in the financial sector. Exactly. Richard, Bradford Hayes, and others we haven't identified, yet working together to manipulate markets, share insider information, and systemically defraud regulators. That would explain some anomalies we've found in the evidence, she acknowledged. Communications referring to partners and affiliated operations that don't match known Meridian or Zenith relationships. Vanessa, who had joined us midway, through the conversation, added her own insight. It would also explain why Richard seemed so confident even when fleeing. He's not just relying on hidden money, he's counting on protection from his network. Agent Diaz made a decision. I'm expanding the investigation scope based on this theory. We'll need both of you to review additional evidence, identify potential connections we might have missed. For the next 2 days, we worked closely with federal investigators, reviewing thousands of documents recovered from Meridian and Zenith. Patterns emerged, subtle connections to other financial institutions, shared methodologies for disguising fraudulent transactions, coordinated market manipulations. Richard Blackwell's network appeared to span at least 7 major financial institutions across 3 continents. The scope was staggering, suggesting systematic corruption on a scale that dwarfed the original Meridian Zenith conspiracy. This is why he allowed himself to be captured, I realized during a late-night analysis session. He's the fall guy for something much bigger. While we focus on him, the network continues operating. But why would he agree to that role? Vanessa questioned. Richard never struck me as self-sacrificing. Because he's negotiated protection, Agent Diaz suggested, joining our conversation. His network will ensure he serves minimal time in a comfortable facility, then set him up with a new identity and access to hidden funds afterward. We need to disrupt their plan, I insisted. Force the entire network into the open before they can adapt. Diaz nodded grimly. That's exactly what we intend to do. Thanks to your insights, we're coordinating simultaneous operations across multiple jurisdictions. When we move, we'll target the entire network at once. That night, as I finally drifted toward sleep, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. What had begun with a false accusation of stealing from the company safe had evolved into exposing one of the largest financial conspiracies in history. I thought about the security footage that had initially cleared my name, revealing a hooded figure using my access code. That small piece of evidence had been the first thread that, when pulled, began unraveling an elaborate tapestry of corruption. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as we work to expose Richard's broader network. But for tonight, I could rest, knowing that the truth, the complete truth, was finally coming to light. Thursday morning arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation. Agent Diaz had called an early strategy meeting, gathering key investigators, at our safe house to coordinate the expanded operation. Based on the evidence you've helped identify, she began, spreading documents across the dining table, we've mapped what appears to be an interconnected network of financial manipulation across multiple institutions. The map she displayed was complex, a web of connections linking executives at major banks, investment firms, and regulatory bodies. Richard Blackwell and Bradford Hayes were just two nodes in a sprawling network. Operation Glasshouse will target 43 individuals across 12 financial institutions in 9 countries, Diaz continued. Coordinated raids, arrests, and seizures will begin at 600 tomorrow. Why wait until tomorrow? I asked. If they suspect we're onto them, we need simultaneous coordination with international partners, she explained. Time zone differences, legal requirements in various jurisdictions. It's complex. Plus, our surveillance indicates the network is still operating normally, unaware of how much we've uncovered. The plan was audacious and risky. If even one target was tipped off, the entire operation could collapse. These were sophisticated financial operators with resources, connections, and contingency plans of their own. What's our role in this? Vanessa asked. Advisory, Diaz replied. You'll remain here under protection, but we'd like you to review intelligence in real time as it comes in, helping identify connections or patterns we might miss. The day passed in intensive preparation. Vanessa and I studied profiles of key targets, familiarizing ourselves with their backgrounds, connections, and roles within the network. Many names were recognizable from financial news, respected leaders whose public reputations masked private corruption. It's staggering, Vanessa murmured as we reviewed the files. These people control trillions in assets globally. They've been manipulating markets, rigging interest rates, extracting wealth from the system while appearing to be its responsible stewards. And using people like Patricia and Thomas as disposable pawns, I added, creating scapegoats whenever scrutiny gets too close. By evening, the operations center in our safe house had expanded. Additional agents arrived with specialized equipment, transforming the modest home into a tactical command post. Multiple screens displayed surveillance feeds, data streams, and secure communications channels with field teams. Richard Blackwell's extradition has been expedited, Diaz informed us during a brief dinner break. He'll be on U.S. soil by midnight. Initial interrogation is scheduled for 0800 tomorrow. He won't talk, I predicted. His network will have arranged for the best legal representation. He'll stonewall. Probably, she acknowledged. But the extradition itself serves our purpose, creates a public spectacle that distracts from our broader operation. His lawyers will be focused on his case, not protecting his associates. As midnight approached, we received confirmation that Richard had indeed arrived at a federal detention facility. News helicopters had tracked his transport from the airport, creating exactly the media circus Diaz had anticipated. Get some rest, she advised us. Tomorrow starts early. Despite the suggestion, sleep proved impossible. I lay awake, mentally, reviewing everything we knew about the network, searching for weaknesses or angles we might have missed. Around 3 a.m., I gave up trying and returned to the operations center, where I found Vanessa already working, examining financial data on a laptop. Couldn't sleep either? She asked without looking up. Too much adrenaline. I poured coffee from a fresh pot. Found anything interesting? Maybe. She turned the screen toward me. I've been reviewing transaction patterns across the network institutions. There's an anomaly here. Large movements of capital in seemingly unrelated accounts, all happening in synchronized windows. I studied the data, seeing the pattern she'd identified. They're creating artificial liquidity spikes, then leveraging them for market manipulation. Exactly. But look at the timing. These movements began accelerating 3 days ago, right after Richard fled. The implication was disturbing. They're moving assets, preparing for something. Richard's capture might be more than a distraction. It could be a signal. We immediately brought our findings to Agent Diaz, who was coordinating with field teams from a makeshift command center in the living room. This confirms our suspicions, she said after reviewing the data. Financial surveillance has detected unusual activity across multiple target institutions. They appear to be liquidating positions, transferring assets to shell companies. They know we're coming, I realized. Not specifically, Diaz clarified, but they're implementing contingency plans. Richard's arrest likely triggered predetermined protocols. Should we accelerate the operation? Vanessa asked. Diaz considered this briefly before shaking her head. Moving earlier risks losing coordination with international partners. We proceed, as planned, but with heightened awareness of their defensive measures. Dawn broke with tense anticipation. The safe house buzzed with controlled activity as final preparations were made. Vanessa and I were positioned at monitoring stations, ready to analyze incoming information as the raids progressed. At precisely 0600, Operation Glasshouse began. Teams moved simultaneously against targets worldwide: Manhattan, London, Zurich, Singapore, Tokyo, Frankfurt, Sydney, Toronto, and beyond. Our screens filled with real-time updates as arrests and seizures commenced. The first hour brought encouraging news. 28 primary targets secured, massive document seizures underway, digital systems locked down before they could be purged. The network had been caught partially off guard, despite their preparations. Boston team reports resistance at Atlanta's capital, reported an agent monitoring communications. CEO Franklin Ward barricaded in office, potential document destruction, in progress. Diaz immediately redirected digital forensic specialists to focus on Atlanta's systems. Priority access to their servers. If they're destroying evidence, there will be traces. Another update flashed across our screens. Singapore authorities report target Oliver Chen not at expected location. Believed fled approximately 12 hours. AGO. That's their Asia-Pacific coordinator, Vanessa noted, referencing our network map. He manages their offshore operations. More concerning reports followed. 3 high-level targets missing from expected locations. Digital evidence showing systematic deletion of files over the past 48 hours. Several bank executives had apparently begun emergency business travel days earlier. They've had a warning, I concluded. Not specific, but enough to trigger their escape protocols. Diaz nodded grimly. The question is how. We've maintained tight operational security. The answer came unexpectedly from one of the first targets taken into custody. Jeremy Frost, CFO of a London investment firm, requested immediate cooperation terms upon arrest. His initial statement, relayed to our command center, was illuminating. Frost claims there's an embedded alert system within their financial network. The London team reported. Automated protocols that flag unusual investigation patterns or document access. Says the system triggered 3 days ago when we began deeper forensic analysis of Meridian's international transactions. It was sophisticated yet simple. The network had created digital tripwires throughout their systems, designed to detect the pattern of an expanding investigation. Our own thorough work had inadvertently warned them. Despite this setback, the operation continued with significant success. By midday, 34 of the 43 targets were in custody. Document. Seizures had yielded substantial evidence. Financial authorities worldwide had frozen hundreds of accounts linked to the network. We've disrupted their operations critically, Diaz assured us during a brief status meeting. Even with some targets escaped, their network infrastructure is compromised. Around 2 p.m., we received news that Richard Blackwell's interrogation had begun. As expected, he had refused to cooperate, maintaining silence except to confer with his attorneys. However, his demeanor reportedly changed when informed about Operation Glasshouse and the extensive arrests of his associates. He wasn't expecting the broader operation, Diaz explained, reviewing the interrogation notes. Though he was the sacrificial figure, with the network continuing operations. Finding out we've rounded up most of his colleagues has rattled him. Will he flip on them now? Vanessa wondered. His lawyers will resist, but we're applying maximum pressure. His best chance for leniency is full cooperation. By evening, the operation's first phase was complete. Teams were processing mountains of seized evidence, securing digital assets, and interrogating those in custody. Though some targets remained at large, including several senior figures, the network had been fundamentally compromised. Our role shifted from monitoring the raids to helping analyze recovered documents. The volume was overwhelming. Millions of pages of financial records, communications, and transaction data. Artificial intelligence systems helped sort and categorize the information, but human insight remained crucial for identifying subtle connections. Working through the night, Vanessa and I focused on communications between Richard and other network members, looking for patterns and code words that might reveal additional operations or assets. The depth of the conspiracy was staggering. Market manipulations coordinated across continents, regulatory capture achieved through strategic placement of allies, billions in illicit profits laundered through elaborately structured transactions. They've essentially created a shadow financial system, I realized as patterns emerged from the data, operating parallel to legitimate markets, but extracting value at every intersection. And using people like us as unwitting facilitators, Vanessa added. How many honest employees were merely props in their theater of legitimacy? Around midnight, a significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Digital forensics specialists analyzing Oliver Chen's abandoned devices in Singapore discovered an encrypted communication system separate from the network's primary channels. It appears to be a secondary command structure, the team reported. A fail-safe network for continuing operations if the primary network was compromised. This discovery launched a new investigative thread. Who was part of this secondary network? Where were they located? How could they be identified and neutralized before they reconstituted the operation? Agent Diaz immediately organized a specialized task force to focus on this angle. Carson, Harper, I want you working directly with this team. Your understanding of the network's psychology and methods could be crucial. The next 12 hours became a race against time. While the primary operation had succeeded beyond expectations, this secondary network represented a dangerous unknown, potentially capable of preserving the conspiracy's core capabilities while sacrificial members faced justice. Working with forensic accountants and intelligence analysts, we developed a profile of the likely secondary network structure. Unlike the primary network centered around institutional leadership positions, this shadow organization appeared to operate through mid-level managers with clean records and minimal public profiles. They're the perfect sleeper agents, I explained during a strategy session. Senior enough to have access and authority, but not so prominent that they attract scrutiny. They could rebuild the network while we focus on prosecuting the figureheads. Saturday morning, 48 hours into Operation Glasshouse, we had identified 17 potential members of this secondary network. Surveillance teams were deployed, digital monitoring implemented, and legal preparations made for a second wave of arrests. Richard Blackwell, meanwhile, had begun showing cracks in his resolve. Faced with evidence of the operation's scope and the potential identification of the secondary network, he requested a modified cooperation agreement. He's offering information about offshore assets and operations, Diaz informed us, in exchange for protective custody and consideration in sentencing. He fears his own people now, Vanessa observed, realizes he might be eliminated as a liability. Exactly, and we can use that fear. With Richard's cooperation, even if limited and self-serving, the investigation accelerated. He confirmed several of our secondary network suspects and provided access codes to encrypted communication channels. While carefully protecting himself and minimizing his own culpability, he nevertheless delivered valuable intelligence about the network's structure and methods. Saturday evening brought a personal milestone. Agent Diaz announced that our physical protection protocol could be downgraded. The immediate threat to you both has substantially decreased, she explained. Most figures who would have targeted you are in custody or too focused on their own survival to organize retaliation. Does That mean we can leave the safe house? Vanessa asked. Not yet. We still need your expertise here, but the security level will be reduced, allowing more normal living conditions. She smiled slightly. You can order your own food instead of eating whatever we bring. Small victories. That night, for the first time in over a week, I slept deeply, without the constant edge of hypervigilance. The network wasn't fully neutralized, but its power had been broken, its leaders scattered or imprisoned, its resources largely frozen or seized. Sunday morning brought news that Detective Coleman had been moved out of intensive care, his condition upgraded to stable. James Wilson had been discharged and relocated to a protected location pending his testimony. They're talking about forming a joint whistleblower support group, Agent Chen told us over breakfast, helping others who expose corporate corruption. That's something I'd be interested in supporting, Vanessa said, and I nodded in agreement. The quarry day progressed with focused work identifying and tracking secondary network members. By evening, surveillance had confirmed suspicious activity from 12 of our 17 suspects, unusual communications, attempts to access secured systems, preparations for potential flight. We move on the secondary network tomorrow, Diaz decided. Synchronized arrests, following the same playbook as the primary operation. What about the remaining targets from the primary group? I asked. Oliver Chen and the others who escaped the first wave? International search operations. Continue. Chen was reportedly spotted in Macau yesterday, though he disappeared before local authorities could apprehend him. We've flagged his biometric data worldwide. As preparations for the second wave intensified, I found a moment to step outside, the safe house for the first time in days. The modest backyard offered little more than a patch of grass and a few shrubs, but the open air felt incredible after prolonged confinement. Vanessa joined me, looking equally relieved to escape the house's confines. Hard to believe it's been just over a week since the lake house, she remarked. Feels like months. Time distortion of crisis, I agreed. Like we've lived an entire alternate lifetime in days. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid orange and purple. The ordinary beauty of it seemed incongruous with the extraordinary events we'd been immersed in. What will you do after this? Vanessa asked eventually. When will we're finally released from federal custody and witness protection? I'd been considering this question in quiet moments. James's suggestion about compliance consulting has merit, using what we've learned to help prevent similar corruption elsewhere. That's similar to the SEC position I'm considering, she noted. Different approaches to the same goal. Maybe we should coordinate efforts, I suggested. Your regulatory perspective, my operational experience, could be a powerful combination. She smiled. Mitchell Carson, are you proposing a business partnership? I think I am. Carson Harper Compliance Consultants has a nice ring to it. Harper Carson sounds better, she countered with a laugh. The moment of levity felt earned after days of intensity. Whatever came next, completing the operation, testifying in what would likely be years of trials, rebuilding our professional lives. We had survived the worst and helped expose a corruption that had seemed untouchable as we returned inside to continue work on the secondary network analysis. I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. From being accused of a theft I didn't commit to helping dismantle an international financial conspiracy, all because security footage had revealed a hooded figure using my access code. That small piece of evidence, that single thread of truth, had unraveled an elaborate tapestry of lies. And in doing so, it had revealed not just the corruption within Meridian Financial, but a path forward for those of us who valued integrity in a system too often compromised by greed. Tomorrow would bring a new phase of Operation Glasshouse. The secondary network would be targeted, more evidence gathered, more conspirators brought to justice. The work was far from complete, but the foundation had been laid for something powerful: accountability in a financial system that had operated too long in shadows. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt genuine optimism about what lay ahead. Not just for the investigation, but for the possibility of meaningful change in an industry that desperately needed it. Monday morning arrived with a sense of controlled urgency. At 5 a.m., the safe house was already bustling with activity, as final preparations were made for the secondary network takedown. Tactical teams across multiple cities were moving into position. Digital surveillance was at maximum intensity, and prosecution teams stood ready with warrants. Vanessa and I took our positions at the monitoring stations, ready to provide real-time analysis as information flowed in. The atmosphere was focused but confident, a stark contrast to the tense uncertainty that had marked the primary operations launch. "Second wave commences in 15 minutes, Diaz announced, surveying the operations center. "All teams report. Ready status." Unlike the sprawling first wave, this operation targeted just 17 individuals across 5 countries, the identified members of the shadow network designed to preserve the conspiracy if its leadership fell. These targets were more challenging in many ways, less visible, more deeply embedded, with fewer obvious connections to investigate. Remember, these individuals have been specifically selected for their ability to operate independently, I reminded. The analysis team. They'll have established protocols for exactly this scenario. At precisely 6 a.m., the coordinated raids began. Updates flowed into our command center in rapid succession. Target Ellis secured at residence in Chicago. Target Watanabe in custody. Tokyo team reports secured documents. Frankfurt team reports target residence empty, showing signs of hasty departure. The pattern quickly became apparent. About half the targets were being successfully apprehended, while others had already fled, likely alerted by the first wave of arrests despite our precautions. "They're better prepared than anticipated," Diaz observed grimly. "Digital forensics, prioritize abandoned locations. We need to know where they're heading." By mid-morning, we had 10 of 17 targets in custody, with the remaining 7 apparently in the wind. Digital evidence recovered from their homes and offices painted a disturbing picture. This secondary network had been activated immediately following Richard's flight, with predetermined protocols for maintaining core operations while the primary network faced legal consequences. Most concerning was evidence that the secondary network had access to substantial financial reserves untouched by the initial asset freezes. Accounts strategically positioned in jurisdictions with minimal cooperation with international enforcement. "They're not just trying to escape justice," Vanessa noted as we analyzed the communications. "They're planning to continue operations with reduced personnel." This realization shifted the investigation's focus. Beyond capturing the remaining targets, we needed to identify and freeze their operational resources before they could be deployed. Around noon, a key breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Richard Blackwell, facing mounting evidence of his central role in the conspiracy and fearing abandonment by his colleagues, had expanded his cooperation. In exchange for enhanced protection and consideration in sentencing, he provided access to a set of encrypted records documenting the network's contingency planning. "These are updated daily with operational statuses and communication protocols," Diaz explained, sharing the newly accessible data. "It's essentially the network's nervous system, showing us exactly how they're responding to our pressure." The information was invaluable, revealing not just the locations of hidden assets, but the methods by which the fugitive operators were communicating and coordinating. Within hours, this intelligence led to the freezing of 37 previously unknown accounts containing billions in assets and the identification of digital communication channels being used by the remaining targets. By evening, 2 more secondary network members had been apprehended based on this intelligence. The remaining 5 were identified in transit, one on a private yacht in the Mediterranean, 2 on a chartered flight to Paraguay, and 2 traveling separately through Eastern Europe. We'll have them all within 48 hours, Diaz predicted confidently. Their resources are diminishing, their options narrowing. As the day's operations wound down, I found myself drawn to a quiet corner of the safe house, suddenly overwhelmed by mental and physical exhaustion. The past 10 days had been the most intense of my life, from being accused of theft to helping dismantle an international financial conspiracy. The constant vigilance, analysis, and high-stakes decision-making had taken their toll. Vanessa found me there, looking equally drained. "You okay?" "Just processing," I replied. "It's hard to believe we're actually seeing the end of this." "Not the end exactly," she reminded me. "The trials will take years, rebuilding the affected institutions, implementing new safeguards. That's the work of a decade, maybe more." "True. But the active threat, the immediate crisis," I gestured vaguely. "That part's nearly over." She nodded, understanding what I meant. "They're talking about transitioning us to standard witness protection. Tomorrow, less intensive security, more normal living conditions." "What about your SEC position?" "Still on the table, pending resolution of immediate security concerns." "You still thinking about compliance consulting?" "More than thinking about it," I admitted. "I've been drafting a business plan during downtime. There's going to be massive demand for financial integrity expertise after all this becomes public." Vanessa smiled. "Harper Carson Consulting. I like the sound of it." "Still stuck on that name order, huh?" Our light-hearted moment was interrupted by Agent Chen. "You two should see this," he said, gesturing toward the main monitoring area. "Charlotte West's latest article just dropped. It's comprehensive." On the central screen was displayed the National Financial Review's website, featuring a massive headline: "Global Financial Conspiracy Exposed. Inside the Shadow Network That Manipulated World Markets." Charlotte's reporting was extraordinary. A detailed exposition of both the primary and secondary networks, their methods, their impacts, and the ongoing international operation to dismantle them. Most remarkably, she had somehow obtained internal documents showing the conspiracy's development over nearly 15 years. "How did she get this?" I asked, astonished by the depth of information. "Multiple sources, apparently," Chen replied, "including some network members who've begun cooperating independently of our investigation. The dam is breaking. People are trying to position themselves favorably before they're implicated." The article named names, detailed specific fraudulent operations, and outlined how the conspiracy had influenced everything from mortgage rates to currency valuations to commodity prices. Most importantly, it connected these abstract financial manipulations to real-world impacts. Retirement funds diminished, home foreclosures increased, small businesses denied crucial financing. "This changes everything," Vanessa observed. "With this level of public exposure, there's no containing the fallout. No political pressure can make this disappear." She was right. Charlotte's article had effectively cemented the investigation's importance in the public consciousness. Whatever behind-the-scenes maneuvering might have eventually buried or minimized the case was now impossible. The story was too big, too public, and too personally relevant to millions of people affected by the conspiracy's manipulations. Tuesday. Morning brought news that the remaining secondary network targets had been located and were under surveillance, with arrests expected within hours. Meanwhile, the first charges against primary network members were being formally filed in courts across multiple jurisdictions. The case against Richard Blackwell alone includes 47 separate counts, Diaz informed us during a morning briefing. Similar numbers for most of the primary targets. These will be the most complex financial crime prosecutions in history. Around midday, we received an unexpected visitor at the safe house. Detective Coleman, released from the hospital but still moving carefully, a cane supporting his weakened left side. "Couldn't stay away from the action," he explained with a grimace that might have been intended as a smile. Figured I'd contributed enough to earn a front-row seat for the finale. His presence was a physical reminder of the personal costs involved in exposing the conspiracy. The bullet that had nearly ended his life had left lasting damage, partial paralysis that doctors weren't certain would fully resolve with rehabilitation. "Any regrets?" I asked him quietly during a private moment. He considered the question seriously before answering. "About getting involved? None. About not recognizing Sanders as corrupt earlier? Every day. Might have saved us all some trouble." "You couldn't have known." "Maybe not. But that's the thing about corruption. It thrives in blind spots, in the assumptions we make about people we think we know." He tapped his cane thoughtfully against the floor. "That's why what you did was so important. You refused to accept the convenient explanation, the obvious conclusion." By afternoon, we received confirmation that all 17 secondary network members were in custody. Their apprehension marked the effective end of the operational phase of Operation Glass House. What remained was the painstaking work of building cases, tracing assets, and ensuring successful prosecutions. "This transition point seems like the appropriate time to discuss your situation," Diaz said, gathering Vanessa and me for a private meeting. "The immediate threat has been neutralized, but your safety remains a consideration given your central role in exposing the conspiracy." "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "Standard witness protection is available if you want it. New identities, relocation, the works. Alternatively, we can implement more limited security measures while allowing you to resume public lives under your own names." Vanessa and I exchanged glances, having already discussed this possibility. "We'd prefer the second option," Vanessa answered for both of us. "Our professional expertise is valuable precisely because of our connection to this case. Anonymity would undermine that." "It's riskier," Diaz cautioned. "There will still be powerful people with grudges against you, even after the prosecutions conclude." "We understand," I acknowledged. "But hiding isn't a long-term solution. Not if we want to help prevent similar corruption in the future." Diaz nodded, respecting our decision. "We'll arrange appropriate security consultations and measures. And of course, you'll both have priority response protocols indefinitely. One call from either of you triggers immediate federal response." That evening, as the safe house began transitioning from operational command center back to ordinary residence, we received word that James Wilson had secured a position with the Financial Fraud Task Force being assembled to implement reforms based on lessons from the conspiracy investigation. "Seems we're all finding ways to transform this experience into something constructive," Vanessa observed. "It's either that or be defined by it forever as victims," I replied. "This way, we're actively shaping what comes next." Wednesday morning marked our final day at the safe house. The security team was reducing its presence, equipment was being removed, and plans were in place for our transition to more independent living arrangements with modified protection. Before departing, Agent Diaz provided a comprehensive briefing on the investigation's status and next steps. "All primary targets are in custody except Oliver Chen, who remains at large but is believed to be in mainland China with limited operational capability. All secondary network members are secured. Asset recovery operations have frozen approximately 82% of identified conspiracy resources." "What about the legal proceedings?" Vanessa asked. "Multiple jurisdictions, multiple trials. The first arraignments begin next week. Richard Blackwell's cooperation agreement has been finalized. He'll provide testimony against other network members in exchange for placement in a minimum security facility and certain asset protections for his family." "And Patricia Donovan? Thomas Reed?" I hadn't forgotten the original players whose actions had set this entire sequence in motion. Both have negotiated lesser plea agreements in light of the broader conspiracy. They were significant players, but ultimately middle management. In the larger scheme, their testimony against Richard and others factored favorably in their arrangements. There was a certain symmetry to this outcome. Patricia and Thomas had been positioned as scapegoats when the conspiracy believed it could control the narrative. Now they were leveraging that same expendability to secure more favorable treatment as the hierarchy collapsed. By afternoon, we were preparing to leave the safe house. My personal effects, limited to what I'd hastily packed when fleeing Richard's lake house, had been supplemented with clothes and necessities provided by the FBI. Vanessa had similarly modest possessions to transfer to our new accommodations. "Feels strange to be leaving," she admitted as we packed. "This place has been our entire world for days." "Stockholm Syndrome for safe houses," I joked, though I understood the sentiment perfectly. The confined space had been both protection and prison, the backdrop to extraordinary events that had transformed our lives. Our new arrangements were separate, but coordinated. Apartments in the same secured building, with discreet security measures and monitoring. The location was confidential, access restricted, but we would have significantly more freedom of movement and communication than during the active investigation phase. As we prepared for final departure, the team gathered for an impromptu farewell. Agent Diaz, typically reserved, offered unexpected warmth in her send-off. "What you've both done is extraordinary," she told us. "Your courage and persistence have exposed corruption that many believed untouchable. The financial system will be fundamentally different and better because of your actions." Detective Coleman, still moving gingerly but determined to stand unassisted for the occasion, added his own perspective. "In 20 years of law enforcement, I've never seen civilian witnesses contribute so significantly to an investigation of this magnitude. You've set a new standard for whistleblower impact." The acknowledgement was gratifying but also somewhat uncomfortable. Neither Vanessa nor I had sought recognition or accolades. We had simply followed the evidence, refused to accept convenient falsehoods, and insisted on accountability regardless of power or position. As we finally left the safe house, stepping into the late afternoon sunlight, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. It had begun with a false accusation, $75,000 missing from a company safe, my access code used by someone else, security footage revealing a hooded figure that wasn't me. That single incident, that initial injustice, had opened a door to a labyrinth of corruption I could never have imagined existed. By refusing to accept the role of scapegoat, by insisting on my own innocence despite overwhelming institutional pressure, I had inadvertently begun unraveling a conspiracy of global proportions. "What are you thinking about?" Vanessa asked as we settled into the secure vehicle that would transport us to our new residence. "How different things might have been if I'd just accepted the accusation," I replied honestly. "If I'd taken a plea deal, or resigned in disgrace, or simply walked away. The network would still be operating," she concluded. "Richard and the others would still be manipulating markets, creating scapegoats, extracting wealth from the system. And we wouldn't be considering a compliance consulting partnership," I added with a smile. "Harper Carson Consulting," she corrected automatically. "We'll flip a coin," I suggested, laughing. As the vehicle pulled away, carrying us toward an uncertain but purposeful future, I felt a sense of closure regarding the original theft accusation that had started everything. That chapter was definitely closed, the truth established beyond question. What remained was the work of building something new, using our hard-won insights to help prevent similar corruption from taking root elsewhere. The security footage that had initially cleared my name had revealed more than just a hooded figure using my access code. It had revealed the vulnerability of systems built on implicit trust without adequate accountability. It had shown how easily integrity could be compromised when oversight was lacking. And most importantly, it demonstrated that even the most elaborate conspiracies ultimately depended on people willing to stand firm against pressure and insist on truth. That was the lesson I would carry forward, the foundation on which I would build whatever came next. Not just compliance with rules, but commitment to fundamental integrity, regardless of pressure, regardless of consequences. Because, as this extraordinary journey had proven, a single person refusing to accept injustice could ultimately unravel even the most powerful conspiracy. The theft accusation that was meant to destroy me had instead revealed a truth that would reshape global finance. And in that transformation, I had discovered not just vindication, but purpose. 3 months after Operation Glasshouse, I stood at the window of our new office space overlooking downtown, watching the city slowly return to normal. The financial district had been in turmoil since the conspiracy's exposure. Banks restructuring, regulators implementing emergency measures, markets adjusting to a system suddenly stripped of its hidden manipulators. The new furniture finally arrived, Vanessa announced, entering with 2 coffee cups and handing one to me. Reception area will be functional by tomorrow. I nodded appreciatively. Just in time for our first official clients, Harper Carson. Compliance consulting, she'd won the coin toss, had moved from concept to reality with remarkable speed. The demand for financial integrity expertise had exploded in the wake of the conspiracy revelations, with institutions desperate to demonstrate their commitment to reform. Our journey from whistleblowers to consultants hadn't been straightforward. The initial media frenzy had been overwhelming. Interview requests, book offers, even movie rights inquiries. We'd declined most, focusing instead on providing expert testimony for the ongoing prosecutions and developing our business model. Have you seen today's Financial Times? Vanessa asked, sliding the newspaper across the desk. The headline read, Blackwell testimony expands conspiracy investigation to regulatory agencies. The article detailed how Richard's continuing cooperation had implicated several senior regulatory officials who had helped shield the network's activities from scrutiny. The web keeps expanding, I noted. At this rate, they'll still be uncovering new connections years from now. That's why our work matters, Vanessa replied. The prosecutions are necessary, but preventing the next conspiracy is even more important. Our consulting approach had evolved from our experiences. We focused not just on technical compliance but on cultural integrity and structural accountability. Our first-hand knowledge of how the conspiracy had operated gave us unique insights into vulnerable points in financial systems. My phone buzzed with a text from James Wilson. Coleman cleared for full-duty return next month. Celebration dinner. Thursday? Detective Coleman's recovery had been grueling but successful. Intensive rehabilitation had restored most of his mobility, and he'd become an outspoken advocate for financial crime whistleblower protections. James himself had thrived in his role with the Financial Fraud Task Force, helping implement systemic reforms based on lessons from the conspiracy investigation. The 3 of us, along with Vanessa, had formed a tight-knit group bonded by our shared experiences. Did you finish the presentation for tomorrow? Vanessa asked, interrupting my thoughts. Just about. Added those case studies you suggested, showing exactly how the network exploited regulatory blind spots. Our first major client was, ironically, the restructured Meridian Financial, now under entirely new leadership with a mandate for radical transparency. They'd hired us to help design compliance systems specifically resistant to the manipulation techniques their former executives had employed. The legal proceedings against those executives continued advancing. Patricia Donovan and Thomas Reed had received reduced sentences in exchange for their cooperation, though both would still serve significant time. Bradford Hayes and most primary network members were facing decades in prison. Richard Blackwell's extensive cooperation had earned him more lenient treatment, though he would likely spend at least 15 years incarcerated. Oliver Chen remained, the only major figure still at large, though recent intelligence suggested he was essentially trapped in mainland China, his assets frozen, his operational capabilities neutralized. More importantly, the financial reforms triggered by the conspiracy's exposure were proving substantial. Emergency regulations had been implemented in major markets worldwide. Congressional hearings had led to bipartisan support for structural changes to financial oversight. A public awakening to the vulnerability of systems previously thought secure had created political will for meaningful reform. "We should head out," Vanessa noted, checking her watch. "Meeting with the SEC Advisory Committee starts in an hour." As we gathered our materials, Agent Diaz arrived at our office. No longer our protective detail, but now a colleague in financial crime prevention. "Thought you might want to see this before it goes public," she said, handing over a sealed envelope. "Arrest warrant for Federal Reserve Vice Chair Lawrence Simmons, based largely on your original evidence combined with Blackwell's testimony." Simmons had been among the most respected financial figures in the country, and apparently a key enabler of the conspiracy's market manipulations. "The higher they are," I murmured, scanning the document. "Exactly why your consulting work matters," Diaz replied. "The system needs rebuilding from within by people who understand both the technical vulnerabilities and the human factors." On the way to our meeting, passing through the heart of the financial district, I contemplated how profoundly things had changed. Buildings that had once housed seemingly impregnable financial institutions now bore the scars of scandal and restructuring. Companies that had existed for centuries had collapsed or been absorbed. Names once synonymous with reliability were now cautionary tales. "Still processing?" Vanessa asked, noting my thoughtful silence. "Just thinking about how it all started. A false theft accusation. Security footage of someone who wasn't me. $75,000 missing from a company safe. Such a small thing compared to what it revealed." "That's how these systems work," she observed. "They count on the small injustices being accepted, overlooked, or buried. They never expect someone to pull a thread and keep pulling, no matter what." At the SEC headquarters, we were greeted with respect that still felt somewhat surreal. Former whistleblowers now valued for the very actions that had once made us targets. The advisory committee included former prosecutors, reformed financial executives, and academic experts, all focused on designing a more transparent and accountable financial system. My presentation on vulnerability assessment methodologies was received with engaged attention. The techniques I outlined, identifying potential exploitation points, implementing verification redundancies, creating protected channels for reporting concerns, directly addressed weaknesses the conspiracy had exploited. Afterward, the committee chair approached us. "Your insights are invaluable precisely because you experience these failures from the inside. You've lived what we're trying to prevent." As we left the meeting, Charlotte West was waiting in the lobby, the investigative journalist whose reporting had helped ensure the conspiracy couldn't be buried or minimized. "Perfect timing," she greeted us warmly. "I'm working on a follow-up piece about the reforms emerging from the scandal. Could I get your perspective as both whistleblowers and now consultants?" Over coffee, we discussed the changes we'd observed and those still needed. Charlotte's questions were incisive, focused on structural vulnerabilities that remained despite recent reforms. "The most important change isn't regulatory," I told her toward the end of our conversation. "It's cultural. Financial institutions need to value integrity as much as profit, and build systems that reward ethical behavior rather than just punishing violations after they're exposed." "That's the hardest change to implement," Charlotte noted, "but potentially the most significant." "Which is exactly why we're focusing on it," Vanessa added. "Technical fixes alone won't prevent the next conspiracy. You need people willing to speak up, systems that protect them when they do, and consequences that make corruption genuinely unattractive." Later that evening, returning to my apartment, still in a secure building but now one I'd chosen myself, I reviewed notes for our upcoming Meridian presentation. The irony wasn't lost on me, helping rebuild the very institution that had once tried to destroy me. My phone rang, Detective Coleman calling from his rehabilitation facility. "Just checking in," he said after I answered. "Heard you had the SEC meeting today?" "Went well. They're implementing several of our recommendations." "Good. This whole system needs people like you, people who've seen the ugliness firsthand but haven't become cynical about fixing it. After our call, I stood at my window watching the city lights, reflecting on how completely my life had transformed in just a few months. From operations manager to accused thief to whistleblower to consultant, each transition forced by circumstances I couldn't have anticipated. The security footage that had exonerated me had launched an odyssey through the darkest corners of financial corruption. But it had also revealed possibilities for reform and renewal that might never have emerged otherwise. Sometimes I realized it takes a complete breakdown to enable a genuine rebuilding. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more presentations, testimony preparations, consulting projects. The work of reform was just beginning, the full impact of the conspiracy still unfolding. But for the first time since this journey began, I felt genuine optimism about where it was leading. The theft accusation that was meant to silence me had instead given me a voice in reshaping the very system that had nearly crushed me. There was a powerful lesson in that transformation, one I intended to carry forward in everything that came next. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.